By 1999, the internet stock boom had gripped Wall Street, and back in his Hangzhou apartment, Ma decided to try again. With his wife and a group of friends, Ma raised $80,000 and set up Alibaba, a site that allowed businesses to sell stuff to each other.
人家美国人强就强在这个硬件，强就强在这个系统建设这一方面确实比你早，但是玩信息玩软的，中国人的脑袋绝不比你们差。我们在座的所有人的脑袋绝不比你们差。
By 2000, Alibaba had raised $25 million from investors, including Goldman Sachs and SoftBank.
He had no business plan and zero revenue, but his eyes was very strong eyes.
In 2003, Alibaba started Taobao, a platform for individual sellers to trade with each other, and publicly declared war against eBay, who had started to make a foray into China.
Jack Ma has this famous saying that Alibaba is a crocodile in the Yangtze River, whereas eBay is a shark in the ocean. And if they fight eBay in the ocean, then they'll lose. But if they fight them in the Yangtze River, then they have a home base advantage.
In 2007, just 1 year after it forced eBay out of China, Alibaba debuted its business-facing division on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. But it delisted 5 years later as its performance sagged. But in 2014, Alibaba raised $25 billion in the world's biggest IPO in New York.
Everybody should have a dream. What if that dream comes true?
After achieving dominance in the business of e-commerce in China, Alibaba has been building an internet empire worth $472 billion, with businesses in cloud computing, online video streaming, movie production, healthcare, sports, retail, and even news media.
Alibaba buying into South China Morning Post really raised eyebrows. This is the largest English newspaper in Hong Kong, and it shows that Jack Ma's ambitions weren't limited to e-commerce. He wanted to influence not just Chinese users, but also overseas users as well.
The US has criticized Alibaba for allowing companies to sell counterfeit and poorly made goods, but in China, it enjoys the favor of China's government. It's part of Ma's company philosophy.
In love with the government, but don't marry with them.
Jack Ma is an extremely fortunate man for jumping on the internet sector so early. Note that this is a person who has no coding skills at all. He's a natural showman and a gifted public speaker and really able to convince others to believe in his vision.
Ma's vision of growing Alibaba to be the world's fifth largest economy faces strong competition at home and abroad. It will require more than just naked ambition and charisma, but Ma is great at getting himself in the right place at the right time. So far, it's served him well.
Peter Thiel is a walking contradiction. He got his bachelor's and Juris Doctorate from Stanford, but speaks out about the horrors of higher education, saying college is
as corrupt as the Catholic Church was 500 years ago.
He's a staunch supporter of the free press, yet he bankrolled a lawsuit to bankrupt an independent media company.
But these were not journalists.
And most of all, he's an immigrant libertarian who's the most public supporter of Donald Trump in all of Silicon Valley.
What Trump represents isn't crazy, and it's not going away.
This is the story of how an openly gay, immigrant genius, libertarian billionaire went from tech contrarian to Silicon Valley's biggest Trump supporter. Peter Thiel was born on October 11, 1967 in Frankfurt, West Germany, to Suzanne and Klaus Thiel. Peter's family emigrated to Cleveland, Ohio when he was 1. An Ayn Rand devotee during his youth, Thiel attended Stanford University majoring in philosophy.
His Stanford experience shaped a really big part of who he decided to surround himself with.
That's Lizette Chapman.
And I cover technology and venture capital here at Bloomberg.
He and his Stanford friends made their first big splash in tech with PayPal. After selling to eBay for $1.5 billion, they would become known as the PayPal Mafia for each incredible success after PayPal. For Thiel, that began with an early, modest $500,000 investment in Facebook.
And in VC speak, early means big risk, but also big reward. He turned that initial $500,000 investment into more than $1 billion in cash.
But Thiel was just getting started with Facebook, and he went on to make a whole bunch of wildly successful investments.
From SpaceX to Airbnb to one of the largest, most powerful companies in the United States, not the world, and of course that's Palantir.
The incredibly controversial secretive data mining startup he founded with his colleagues from PayPal. It connects data silos and then allows non-technical people to search that information for patterns. Data like
financial information, feeds from video cameras, biometric details, passport information, flight manifest.
Palantir doesn't talk much about how they collect this data, who has access to it, or what they do with it. But they have contracts with
the Department of Homeland Security and the CIA and the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission.
And several other federal agencies. It's the richest company you've never heard of, valued at $20 billion. But there are plenty of obscenely wealthy people in Silicon Valley. What makes him different...
He's a complex ball of multiple contradictions.
Take college, for example. Even though college was extremely important for Thiel, there's something called the Thiel Fellowship.
In exchange for dropping out and a promise not to pursue college, Thiel would give them $100,000 each.
You basically tell people that if you get a diploma, you're saved. Otherwise you go to hell. You go to Yale or you go to jail.
Also, his relationship with the press.
Here's another contradiction. He's donated to free press initiatives, including the Committee to Protect Journalists.
But he also secretly spent tens of millions of dollars bankrolling a lawsuit filed by Hulk Hogan over the publication of a sex tape and bankrupting the independently run Gawker Media. Why did he do this? Because in 2007, one of Gawker Media's blogs, ValueAg, outed him as gay. And with the lawsuit, he
found an opportunity to back at them by funding the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan was able to bring then, but he wouldn't have been able to do that without Thiel's money.
And finally, Thiel's biggest contradiction, his endorsement of Donald Trump.
When he was asked about his support for Trump, he was surprised at the outrage that came with it from many of his colleagues in Silicon Valley. He didn't want more of the establishment.
No matter how crazy this election seems, it is less crazy than the condition of our country.
After briefly supporting Carly Fiorina in the primaries, Thiel pivoted to Trump, donating $1.25 million to Trump and his associated super PACs in October 2016. And he didn't just help Trump financially. He gave a full-throated keynote speech supporting Trump at the Republican National Convention.
I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
And when Trump was finally elected, Thiel was given the reins to an enormous amount of power.
And I want to thank you, man. You have a very special guy.
He was named the transitional advisor. And in that role, he did a lot of interviewing and a lot of vetting to fill hundreds of positions and different jobs within the administration.
But it turns out Thiel's support isn't unconditional.
Talking to people who spend time with him, I have also heard that he is no longer a great supporter of Trump.
It was reported that Thiel was unhappy with the direction of Trump's presidency. Ever since, he's been mum, making no public appearances, no statements, and staying out of the spotlight altogether. Although there have been suggestions that Trump could tap Thiel for a top intelligence post or ambassadorship, there's no indication he'd accept.
He's described his relationship with politics as schizophrenic. He gets really involved, and then he runs away as fast as possible.
Whether Thiel takes a new position or simply continues as board director at Facebook and Palantir, at just 50 years old, he's primed to wield some serious influence in technology and politics for decades to come.
"2016 is again the hottest year on record, and the previous 17 years have seen our 16 most scorching. Scientists overwhelmingly agree. Global warming is the culprit. And it's just getting started. Ice caps, extreme weather, wildfires, droughts, and the hits keep coming. What are we doing about it? In 2015, the world took its boldest step yet to stem climate change with a historic accord in Paris. Here's the hard part. Nations must change energy policies and invest huge amounts of money, and they will likely do it without the United States. President Donald Trump announced on June 1st that the U.S. would withdraw from the accord.
The reality is that withdrawing is in America's economic interest and won't matter much to the climate.
Here's the situation. Decades in the making, the Paris Agreement united the U.S., China, and more than 190 other nations in a push to limit fossil fuel pollution. The UN-sponsored plan secured pledges to cut greenhouse gases, the emissions that trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, in an effort to avoid the rise of disease and other environmental disasters that climate models predict. But even if all pledges are met, the globe is expected to warm by as much as 3.4 degrees this century, the UN target of well below 2 degrees. Meeting the Paris means that governments will have to offer more incentives for clean energy, scale back support for fossil fuels, make emissions more costly, and reduce deforestation. It's estimated that the deal will require $13.5 trillion of spending through 2030. Here's the argument. Unlike past climate pacts such as the Kyoto Protocol, each country set its own Paris targets and then promised to revisit and improve them. The U.S. was primed to play a lead role in climate change, but Trump's energy and executive order reverses Obama-era rules and directives put in place to combat climate change, and expands production of coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel. The resulting policies threaten the global fight against climate change. Without the U.S. commitment to emissions reduction, other countries may join it in abandoning the Paris Agreement. This could make it almost impossible and even more expensive down the line to stop climate change. Optimists argue that the shift to a lower carbon future is already underway. Business cities and U.S. states, such as California, are already investing in wind and solar and taking other steps to make it work.
I've actually been called an environmentalist. You can believe that.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore neon works of art and design. Origins of the creative content of a lot of the work at Lightbright comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people come with a napkin sketch, some people come with an Adobe Illustrator file, and we have a whole design team who then we kind of work together to help create layouts of what it might look like. Scale it up and create a paper template using a pen plotter. And that paper template actually becomes our guide for what we're going to bend the neon to. We take from the office into the glass shop. We pick out the right size tubing with the right color for the right size project. From there, we heat up the glass tubing. Heat the glass well 1,000 degrees in order for it to get into its molten state. We heat up and bend the glass tubing to match the template. One of our chandeliers has over 100 different bends in it. So each one of those bends has to be marked for a heated up bend. We also have to allow the glass to cool between the bends so that the next area can be worked on and heated up in its own unique fashion. It turns into spaghetti, and then we have to make sure that that spaghetti lines back up and cools to the template. We use a blow hose to connect our mouth to the tube, create a volume that's closed, no pressure in there with our mouth. There's just a variety of challenges that come up inherently in working with glass. Glass can crack due to stress, and sometimes you'll just have a batch that all it wants to do when it gets near a torch is crack. To go in using the crossfire or the hand torch and actually weld all of those pieces together. The last step on that is then to weld on electrodes onto either end. Each one of those steps is very, very specific. I draw inspiration from so many different experiences. It's hard to come up with one thing that's particular, but one of the ways that I really am able to connect with the creative is to float. Floating is a similar experience to meditation, to psychedelics. Going into a blackened room and laying out in a body of water and salt that's heated to your body temperature, and it allows for all sort of external stimulation to fall away. And your internal world really begins to bubble up and manifest. You really get to experience a different relationship to your mind. I think I work with neon because I can't not work with it. It's so challenging and so rewarding. And those things are so intertwined that there's no way of separating it out. I learn so much and continue to learn so much by working with it. I find so much inspiration in working with it, and I just continue to experience new and different things through the medium. It's that close to me at this point. Once the neon tube is completed, we have to hook it up to our manifold for bombarding. The manifold is opened, a vacuum is drawn. We check the tube for leaks with our Tesla coil. We close the tube back off, and we heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer. As the tube is heated up, it releases anything that's not inert inside the tube, and we evacuate that out. We introduce the gas into it. And we seal the tube off, sealing into that tube whatever gas we introduced into it. think my favorite part of making a neon light is when I see it lit up for the first time. Different gases, when electrified, emit different wavelengths of light. Neon gas is this very bright orange, fiery red color. Argon gas creates a very intense blue, but that light output that is produced can then be expressed in a different wavelength by coating the inside of the tubes with a phosphor coating that takes that one wavelength of light and emits a different wavelength. We bring it over to the aging table where we hook it up to an age-in transformer and allow it to settle, age the gas in that we've introduced to it. There's always a stray particle of something left inside the tube. But that time that the oxide coating can act to scrub whatever is left inside the tube while things are getting settled into place. Once the tubes are aged in, we move on to our process of assembling two halves of the fixture together in a jig, gluing up the center of the fixture to its spindle. Once the adhesive dried, we would connect the wires from the fixture together into a transformer, and we turn on power and it lights up. Part of what we love about what we do here is that we try and put out into the world the kind of things that we'd like to see. I still am surprised when it lights up. I'm still excited when I get to see it illuminated. There's an ineffable quality to it. To me, is this insight into the inner workings of the universe. It literally is. It's a way of looking at what is surrounding us in the cosmos in a new light.
bit like an addiction. You've got to make something. You have to do something. It's borderline obsession. And every bike we build is my favourite bike at the time, and as soon as it's done, I want to build another one. Sven Cycles is something I've been thinking about ever since I started cycling in my late teens. We want bikes that ultimately you'll really enjoy riding. There's never a bike that's the same. There's always a slight change. And as we build them individually as well, they have the marks of a bike that's built by hand. Most people I know cycle have an idea of their dream bicycle. And it may be an evolving idea you've had in your head. And we've worked with a lot of people that have come to us with sketches and scrapbooks. It's really, really nice to build something that's just one-off and unique. I think a lot of people see a bicycle as two wheels and a frame in the middle. There are a lot of subtle changes and nuances in design which can change the riding characteristics quite dramatically. I'm a really big fan of modernist architecture, and the simplicity of a modernist building is really hard to achieve. And with some of our bikes, they may look very simple, but I think people should not underestimate the time and effort that goes into designing a product. Tubing is key to a bike's feel and ride. Reynolds tubing has been in my life ever since I can remember. Growing up, I could never afford a frame manufactured with their tubing. We can now put a badge on our bike saying manufactured Reynolds, which is a sort of thing as a kid I just wouldn't have believed was going to happen. Every part of the bike has a specific tube. It's not universal. The first thing we do is get the tubes out, check they're correct, check the wall thicknesses, sand the edges, make sure it's all really clean, because if it's not clean, the tubes won't join together correctly. We build in steel because I still believe it's one of the best materials to use. It's been used in bikes since the late 1800s, and they're still using it now for a very good reason. It's the flexibility that we can replace the tube, repaint the bike, and you wouldn't know it's damaged. I just like working with it. It's very sculptural. This isn't sort of aerospace precision engineering. It's a steel rule and a marker. So when we're cutting the tubes, it's within a mil or two. But what we're trying to do is take the best from bicycle building in the past and add a little bit of modern flair to it. There's various techniques for building bicycles. We do a thing called fillet brazing, where you connect the pipe together. We use a bronze rod and a flame. We heat the tubes up to the same temperature and we fill the joint with bronze. And it gives a very, very sort of fluid, lovely, sort of quite sculptural feel. You've got to practice. You've got to be able to judge material temperatures. You've got to just look at it and you just get a feel for it. It's the stage where your tubes start to look a bit like a bicycle. My father's a jeweller. He'd make sort of very pretty things, which are lovely, but for me, they don't really have any function. What I love about bicycles, you can start on a Monday with a box of tubes. You can be riding it by the weekend, and it can last you for the rest of your life. Outside of the frame and forks, the other most important part is the wheels and tyres. When you build the wheels, you have to lace them, so there's little holes going all the way around the rim. You poke the spoke through. We do build all our wheels by hand here because a machine can't get 30 years worth of wheel building experience. Colour is very, very personal. With any of our bikes, you can have them painted whatever colour you want. We've matched one to the teapot, so we can get that scanned and we can match that, or someone's favourite item of clothing. I like to let the bike sit for 4 or 5 days minimum, just so the paint can have time to cure a little bit, and then we assemble it. We get out all the new components, and it's a case of putting them together. Some bikes you can assemble in 3 hours, some will take 3 days. And we've built bikes that cost in the £10,000 plus mark. Some people, they're saving up and this is their bike and they're going to own it for the rest of their lives. So we just want to make sure they get the right thing. I think the bike for me was the first time I had some freedom. So as soon as I had one, I was off. A lot of people still get that thrill as when they were a kid blasting down a hill, wind going through their hair. It's fun. Everyone has their favourite jacket or something that just makes them feel good. If you've got a bike that fits well, you actually feel part of it. Building bicycles as a creative outlet is fantastic. It's not something you do because you're going to get a big paycheck at the end of the day. You do it something you have a passion for it.
If you ever saw a wooden surfboard, it was probably hanging in somebody's house or underneath the deck. But kind of in the last 10 or 15 years, wood has made a big comeback. They surf wonderfully. It's beautiful and it feels great to be on one of them. I always had a love for wood and kind of passionate about things that went in the water. I've kind of been around wooden boats most of my life. There's just so much character. The way they're built, the stories that come with them, a lot of that has translated over to why we build surfboards the way we do. When we first started thinking about building surfboards, wood was the natural material we chose. They have a very high strength to weight ratio. Wooden surfboards have the longest history of use in the surf world than any other material. People have been surfing wooden surfboards since kind of the first documented history of people riding waves. The board starts in CAD, where we take a 3D model, break down the shape, and kind of create frames and templates and all the inner parts of the board that we get cut on a CNC machine. We take those frames and we just pop them out, assemble the frame into kind of a skeleton. We go out to our lumber shed, pick a bunch of cedar, and bring them into our mill shop, put glue along the edges, clamp it all together into a panel. Everything's book matched, you have symmetry in the colors and texture of the wood. Cut your outline. Take our assembled frame, gently put it down right on top of the plank. Once that foundation is started, you're basically building up the three-dimensional shape, the outside part of the board, using lots of strips that kind of interlock and fit together. Every piece of wood is going to be different, and it's all going to react differently. There are frustrations with it, but I think that's one of the things that keeps it challenging. You learn to read the kind of what the grain lines are doing and what the color of the wood is telling you. Once those rails are cleaned up, we put our top planks on. It's a little bit like putting a lid on a box. It's like, this is it. Whatever's inside that board is staying inside that board. And by tensioning some rope, you can clamp the two together. It's like a time capsule. What makes our boards unique are they are built right here in York. They're built using material that grows right here in the state of Maine. They're built 100% by hand by local craftspeople and surfers. There's a lot of time that goes into these boards, between 40 and 60 hours start to finish. We wanted to build surfboards that were as hollow as they could be, but still be strong enough to work well. Too light and they don't surf well, but too heavy and they don't surf well. So there's a balance point there, and that's where we try to be. Taking the board off the rocker table once the top has gone on, that is by far one of my top favorite parts. It's just you and a shaping stand, a board, and a hand plane. Everything else is out of your view. It's simple, it's pleasurable, it's quiet. You can be with your thoughts and you can just kind of be present. There's something about taking a nice sharp edge tool to a beautiful piece of wood and feeling the curls coming off and knowing that every pass that you're making, you're kind of getting it closer and closer to what you have in mind. Once we've shaped it down and the board's looking like it's supposed to look like, time for it to go into the glassing room. 4-ounce fiberglass, laying it over the board, draping it over the edges, cutting it, applying epoxy, and on the board. Once both sides are lamb coated, it's time to put in the hardware. Drill and router and install the fin box. And on the other side, we drill and put in the leash plug and a vent. There's a lot of air just naturally inside the board, and that air wants to expand and contract with temperature changes. And that vent has a little piece of Gore-Tex fabric in it, and it allows air to kind of breathe both ways, but it doesn't allow water to get in. Once all that hardware is put in, it goes back into the glassing room. We brush a nice, beautiful, thick coat of epoxy over the whole surface, and that we call a gloss coat. That's supposed to look beautiful and glossy and shiny and flawless. You get to see that board come to life. Whatever the colors in the wood, they really come out. It just makes it look like candy. You just want to touch it and run your hands down it, and it's just kind of the icing on the cake. Once everything is hard, we put it into what we call the oven, get that epoxy to cure, really kind of bake it, and just get it to harden. Put in the fin, screw in the vent, and ship it out. We just love the idea of building something that's sustainable and long-lasting and made by hand. Kind of gives you a deeper connection to the product over something you might buy on a shelf. When a customer gets the board, they feel it. They 100% feel the amount of work and the amount of passion that went into the board. So I'm not really looking at hours and efficiency. We're looking at like doing it right and enjoying it as we go.
Ma Baoli, better known as Gang La, is one of the 4 grand marshals leading New York's Pride Parade this year. But in the country he comes from, being gay is still a social taboo. The CEO of a Beijing-based internet company is on a mission to improve the lives of millions of gay men in China.
对于每一个 LGBT 人群来说，即使这个国家不允许你跟同性爱人结婚，但是你仍然要勇敢地去选择你自己的生活，你仍然应该拥有幸福生活的权利。
Ma's company Blue City runs an app and a website specifically for gay men. Blue is one of the biggest gay social networking apps in the world, with an estimated 30 million registered users. Unlike most other apps, Blue is more than just dating or hookups.
大家可以在我们这个软件里面找他自己的情感，然后可以阅读相关的内容，然后可以进行一些娱乐，比如玩游戏啊，比如看直播啊等等。
Back in 2000, when Ma studied at a police school in northern China, he realized he didn't feel like everyone else.
因为他们都找女朋友，然后谈恋爱，但是我对长得好看的同性的男生，我反而觉得对我更有吸引力。所以那个时候我就到互联网上去找这样的一些资料，然后希望能够告诉我自己我到底是谁。互联网上所有的信息都是负面的，都是错的，就是说同性恋要电击疗法，要被治疗，然后要吃药等等。
After visiting some foreign websites with different attitudes to homosexuality, Ma created his own site for a Chinese audience, encouraging people that
他们也是正常的，他们不用自卑，然后也不用自杀。
Even though attitudes towards homosexuals are slowly changing in China, it's still a social stigma. The virtual world of Blood, where members can be open about their sexuality, is for most a striking contrast to their real lives. This is live streaming, a function added to Blood in late 2015, right as the internet craze was starting to take off in China. Many self-made stars like Jin make decent amounts of money by receiving audiences' virtual currencies and gifts.
我们不是彼此的初恋，初恋这种事儿多不靠谱啊。
For Kyle and Klaus, a couple who have come out, live streaming on Blood means something different.
其实我经常会收到很多粉丝的一些互动的留言，就是类似就是说你们让我们看到了同志情侣之间的一些希望啊，我看到这样的留言我是很欣慰。
The government's rules for acceptable content online may shift quickly in China, with LGBT material in a grey area. Many companies feel the chill of the recent internet crackdown, but Blue City still runs as usual. Ma has won the Chinese government's trust by helping with HIV prevention among gay men. A third of the company's staff are dedicated to screening pornographic and politically sensitive content.
我不太多的愿意去对抗，我更多的愿意去对话，去改变他们的想法。我觉得这个可能在中国来说是更有效的。
In the past 5 years, Blue City has grown from a team of 7 people to a promising business with about 250 staff. Ma said the company earned over $15 million last year, mainly through advertising and selling virtual currencies to live streaming audiences. Now the company is expanding overseas.
我希望吧，通过我们的努力，Blue能够成为全球第一家在美国纳斯达克或者是纽交所上市的这样的同质互联网公司。
This is Rich Chiga. He's a Chinese rapper by way of Indonesia, and he's very popular on the internet. This is Joji. He's a Japanese-Australian singer, and he's also very popular on the internet. Plus, Joji invented the Harlem Shake meme. Let me say that again. This guy, Joji, in the blood bathtub, invented the Harlem Shake meme. But we'll come back to that. So Rich and Joji are both signed to 88 Rising, an entertainment company hoping to build a lasting global brand that will outlive singular moments of virality. They primarily create content combining Asian culture and hip-hop, a formula that apparently pleases the internet gods greatly. They've only been around for 18 months, but they're already putting up major label numbers.
I think that we have an unprecedented collective of talent, a group of predominantly Asian artists, really making waves globally, which from an independent point of view as well.
88's founder, Sean Miyashiro, cut his teeth launching Vice's electronic music channel, Thump. But quickly, Sean became interested in life beyond dance music.
I knew that after launching a whole content platform that I have kind of the ability and the know-how to do it again, but for what was the question.
So Sean moved to the Bronx to start over and figure it out. He couldn't afford an office space, so he worked out of his car at the top of a grimy parking garage.
Everything kind of started here. If you look around, this is my environment. This is my serenity, really. 88 Rising was built here. Built on the grounds of LA Fitness residence in a parking garage. I was living in the Bronx. I'm just damn, where the hell do I go? So I just come up here and I just kind of figure things out every single day. Being okay, what the hell is this thing? Coming here was kind of my own kind of private office, basically. To be honest, I would even go to the bathroom here. I would take pisses here, you know what I mean? It was, it's just too far to go back down there. When I need Wi-Fi, I'd spend a good part of the day at Dunkin' Donuts. Hi, how are you? Can I get a chicken snack wrap?
Before 88 Rising officially launched, Sean caught a surprise break in the form of a Twitter friendship with a funny 16-year-old kid from Indonesia named Brian, who taught himself English by watching Rubik's Cube tutorial videos on YouTube. Seriously, that's true.
I thought his Twitter was genius, from the future, just crazy, and just the shit that he was saying, the memes he was making. But I didn't know that he rapped or anything like that. I really didn't, and he came up with that stick 2 weeks later.
12 in the morning, pop shells for a living, and baby gon' smell blood trail every minute, bro.
Dat Stick was Brian's first ever attempt at making a rap song, and it immediately went viral.
Everything was great about it, but the one thing that I noticed is the song was hard as hell. Just everything about it, man. Just it was menacing, bro.
Soon after the video dropped, Brian signed with 88 Rising.
I'll FaceTime with Rich. Sorry for calling you Rich Chiga on my phone, Rich. Brian, he gets super pissed off that he's saved in my phone as Rich Chiga. He's like, dude, am I not a human to you? What's good, bro?
What's good, brother?
How you doing?
Doing great. I did the sound check.
How was it?
It was tight.
So, Brian could definitely rap, but some viewers understandably took offense at a Chinese kid satirizing rap cliches and calling himself Rich Chiga. But if a group of well-known rappers saw the video and genuinely liked it, that could at least help validate Brian as a legit hip-hop artist. Plus, it could be really funny.
It was just kind of an idea that I just had on the spot. Everything that rappers say is better and funnier and smarter and wittier. It's just more entertaining. We just edit it as tight as possible, put it up, and It really worked.
12 in the morning, pop shows, still living there.
Yo, this nigga got a pouch on and a Reebok pouch.
This is the hardest nigga of all time.
You said when you come for a chigga like me. That was dope.
It's just lit, and I think people will take it as a joke at first, but it's like if he ran with that and kept doing more videos like that, it's just lit.
You know, I'd never been to America before, and like all of a sudden, just like I see like all the rappers that I listen to just like reacting to my stuff, and I was like, what? How did this happen?
The reaction video also went viral, and even led to a remix of Dat Stick featuring Wu-Tang's Ghostface.
I'll get on that track. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Really, on the remix?
Yeah. Oh, you know him?
And yeah, the remix went viral too. Brian has since acknowledged the misstep in his name and claims he may change it. But for the time being, he's still Rich Chigga to his fans. An ever-growing global audience, hungry for more releases from emerging talent around the world.
I didn't know that it was gonna be this impactful and this important to people, and I'm very thankful and blessed that it has. And every day now that I wake up, it's like it's just like a new mission every day.
A major part of that mission involves Joji. Remember the bloody bath guy? He's a former YouTube personality in the middle of a career transition.
The sound of this song, Will He, it's like a trap song that you can like slow dance to. Awkward prom shit, you know what I mean? I used to do crazy episodic internet videos. It was going well, and one day it was me and a few friends just in a room. We were casually chilling, and then someone plays the song, and it's brand new at the time. I happened to have a lot of costumes laying around, so I told the other guys, I was like, get in these costumes and let's just dance to it. Like, who cares? We were like, okay, let's just go crazy at the drop. So that video goes up. I go to sleep, and the next morning, everyone's doing it. Like, next morning. That taught me a lot about the internet, how people want to just be a part of something. And from that point on, something changed, and I was a little better at understanding demographics and people and what they want to see and what they want to hear. I was friends with a couple other artists who were affiliated with 88, and then I also started to realize that 88 is the bridge between Western and Asian entertainment, and I really wanted to be a part of that.
Joji just released the In Tongues EP, his first project as a serious artist.
Joji's In Tongues record came out a couple weeks ago. It's #2 on Billboard on the R&B charts, which is crazy for, independent release, and he's like a brand new artist.
And the success is even more impressive, knowing he went from creating something like this.
It's just Taco Bell. What could possibly go wrong?
To creating something Tonight, Rich Chigga has a show in New York City. Tickets sold out in an hour.
I came here, I'm first online. I was here at 1. I was the third person online.
So why'd you get here so early?
Because I want to see Rich Chigga. I want to touch him.
What do you guys think of Joji?
He's
That's my dad, son.
You guys copped the new EP or like?
Yeah. I woke up at 6 in the morning just to cop that shit. And then I listened to it, and that shit started making me cry.
This is actually kind of exciting. Every time, this never gets old. Like, you live online and social media, but like, there's nothing like just being with the people.
More often than not, viral success happens by accident. And then after an appearance on Ellen or Jimmy Kimmel, the creator's star power fizzles out. But Idiot Rising has figured out how to turn potential gimmicks into brands with an actual following that keeps coming back for the next thing.
Oh, shit!
So keep an eye out for Idiot's next move. But more than likely, it won't be covered on network television or terrestrial radio. Although, as they've already proven, nowadays that really doesn't matter.
Online retailer Farfetch is betting it can shape the future. This is its concept store, showcasing the latest in retail tech.
How do you capture all of that fantastic information that you gather in store with customers, touch and feel products? And we created a concept called the connected rail. And this is using a combination of RFID and ultrasound. The RFID signal recognizes the product, and the ultrasound recognizes the movement. Take the product off, and then you'll start to see your products appear. And essentially, it's like online browsing behavior. Whichever products you touch and pick up in the store are automatically sent to your app. This is effectively what you've created is your in-store wish list. In the middle, you'll see essentially a hologram of the product. What the customer sees, they control the experience on a touch device. What this allows the customer to do is take elements of products and then add their own style to it. Right, so this is the connected mirror. So in this example, I see my products. I select a coat, and that's tried it, and it's slightly too big for me. So what I can do is choose an alternative size and send a request to the sales associate, and they'll bring that size to me in the fitting room mirror. You'll also see that we've got some product recommendations here. Crucially, the sales associate's able to push items into the mirror from their device. If you wanted to, you could simply use the mirror and pay and go. Your items would then be packed and dispatched to you afterwards.
Do you want me to turn you so you're looking outwards? Yes, please. How about there?
First time we came out with B, Jade said it feels like I've been released from prison.
Do you want these, Mrs? Definitely. Definitely. Right.
And she could say hello to everybody, people she hadn't seen for months.
It's Jade.
Oh.
So you can talk to Jade through this. Hi, Katie. She's there.
Hi.
Every time anyone's seen her, they want to know why she's there. And it's kind of the opposite of when you're in a wheelchair and people see you and they kind of go, oh, should I look? I don't know what the right protocol is. When there's a tiny robot with its bright little eyes going around just looking happy everywhere, it really opens you up for conversation.
You've got some friends here, look. Hiya.
When I saw her for the first time, I remember thinking, this is going to change things. This is one of those points where if this was a book, this would be the cliffhanger. have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means that I have a lot of dislocations, there's a lot of pain, and a lot of seizures and whatnot. So I can end up on my own in my room for long periods of time.
Yeah, my love.
A lot of the time, with a condition like my own, of course there's the pain, and the pain is bad, and the dislocations are bad, and the seizures and being in paralysis and never knowing whether you're going to be able to wake up properly tomorrow, that's bad. But what's worse still is being able to count the number of people you see a day on one hand.
Are you ready?
Sure am, I'm just hoping the connection's going to stay.
Yeah, me too. Alright, here we go.
When you're used to just the same little metre by metre and a half window every day, and you've been there for months, being able to just see the sky from somewhere else, or the tops of trees, or a sign, is incredible. Or being able to have that kind of chat in the car that most people would probably take for granted.
I'm going to go past Grandma and Grandad so you can give them a wave. Now, if Jade is particularly seizure-y, she can still take part. And that's brilliant, really, because before she would just be left in a bed or in a house with just her carers. It's quite a small world, that.
Right, so there's one of her. Here, this costume I'm busy making at the moment. When I'm not on bed rest and I'm not just wearing pyjamas all the time, I enjoy being able to dress as different characters and go to Comic Cons and that kind of thing, because it just lets me show a different side of myself, and it's a bit of fun. If you can't go out that often, you've got to enjoy it when you do.
Was that? Good.
It's one of those weird things where I want to not have to use B because I want to be well enough to be able to go to those places myself. Like, it really makes a big difference to me to be able to go into school. But the thing is, with my condition fluctuating all of the time, I can't go into school reliably. And so far it's interesting. Still a few little things that we need to work out, but for the most part I think it's going fairly well, and it's brilliant because I can really tell the difference between today and yesterday. How yesterday I forced myself to go into school when I wasn't very well and I was really tired afterwards and ended up having loads of seizures, whereas today I've been able to do all of the work. I've been able to keep a clear head and not be ill, which means I'm able to be more focused on my schoolwork.
So there is my first step of working, is to simplify root 8. The algebra test is next week.
Now I'm trying to make friendships which I'll be able to maintain with B. Before that, I end up letting people down quite often. B gives me hope, yeah. She's just always there. And if I can't do something, she can. And if I need sort of assistance to be able to make commitments, then she's there, and she means that I feel like a more valuable person because I'm more reliable.
it debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for 5th generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told about 5G is that really for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there, not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
The cubicle represents a tyranny. It confines your imagination, your thoughts, into a small physical area. Imagine pretty much every software engineer or finance person being able to, disconnect from their desk and look at holographic monitors on a beach and doing their work from there. That's not going to be science fiction. It's the modern office place.
Silicon Valley is all about building the future. A startup called Meta thinks it's getting there first, thanks to a big bet that it's made on augmented reality.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome to Meta.
Thank you.
Call it a 360-degree office where you can spatialize your thoughts as part of your workflow for education, architecture, design, engineering, etc.
People often mix up augmented reality with virtual reality. VR totally blocks your ability to see or hear the real world. AR overlays holograms onto what you already see. Meta has tried to make its version of the workspace feel familiar.
You grab the hologram instead of using a controller or a mouse, and your brain already knows how to do it. In other words, we've designed an operating system that humanity has always known how to use. So you can see this eyeball, which is, by the way, photorealistic. You can see my hand is occluding the eyeball, and now the eyeball is occluding my hand, right? You see those two circles? They get small, and then they turn into this glowing white ball, and then I can move my hand around supernaturally. I can do this with two hands and rotate the thing. I can stretch it. I can throw it back right into the shelving system, and that's all you have to learn to become a modern worker.
And to prove this, the employees at Meta have started to get rid of their computer monitors, trading them in for Meta's augmented reality headsets. Myron thinks that in less than a decade, we'll all be just wearing strips of glass that can project holograms.
In the early 80s, everybody had computers on their desktop, but no one was using them because they had a lot of work to do. So they were still using typewriters. And at some point, the CEO took all the typewriters away and everybody was forced to use their computers. So it's very exciting to see a new generation of technology, a new paradigm.
I consider us like pioneers in the holographic world. I'm pulling up my browser with my hands and sending out emails to colleagues and just kind of really acclimating to the new environment.
Now you're putting on my computer, essentially. Our digital lives live on our phones. We have all of our pictures and notes and all these kinds of things. So, and why don't you write yourself a little sticky note? I like it. And go ahead and just take your fist right over the top of the sticky note and close your fist. And now...
Oh, what? Meta's own transition to augmented reality has run into plenty of unexpected problems. And it's still going to be a while before you'll start to see these devices in your office. But I think it's a future worth waiting for.
If we could see these holograms between us, we will have been able to share our work with one another more naturally, more efficiently, and more productively than ever before. Humanity will have evolved slightly.
This is Hatsune Miku, Japan's sensational virtual pop star. She's released over 100,000 songs in multiple languages and performed sold-out concerts around the world. Her image has appeared in games, on TV, in car races, and is even etched on the side of a Japanese space rocket.
I came for Hatsune Miku, Carlos.
She's Lady Gaga's favorite digital pop star and opened shows for her in the US 3 years ago. Tens of thousands of fans attended her exhibition and live shows near Tokyo recently.
理想のアイドルっていうとどの曲でもミクはすごい綺麗に歌ってくれる。
他没有缺点啊，没有任何让我们感到不开心的一些新闻。
She's everything to everybody. That's probably why she's so popular.
Miku's creator Hiroyuki Ito and his Sapporo-based company have been developing the virtual diva for over 10 years.
初音ミクとはキャラクターとしてすごくYouTube とかで検索するとたくさんの初音ミク出てくるんですけども、元々の初音ミクのその原点は歌声を合成するソフトウェアなんです。
Both the software and character are named Hatsune Miku, meaning the first sound of the future. Originally based on Yamaha's Vocaloid technology, Miku the software has a sound bank containing voice samples and a huge array of tools. You input the melody and lyrics, then Miku the character sings them. To date, Krypton has sold 120,000 software licenses at $200 each to fans around the world who use it to create numerous songs and share them online. Some of the fan-created songs are chosen to be part of Miku's concerts, for which they're paid a royalty fee.
もともと初音ミクっていう存在自体がボトムアップって言いますか、中にはアマチュアクリエイターじゃなくて今もうすでにプロになって活躍している方もいらっしゃるんですけども。
The company also has other revenue streams. It makes money from merchandising, licensing deals, and concert ticket sales. According to the real-life musicians who perform with Hatsune Miku, the virtual pop star is interesting and surprising.
今年で3年ぐらい、ちょうど3年ぐらいやってきて、ライブも数十本、数百本だったので、そういうことが演奏によって起こせる感じのそういう器みたいな感じになってます。初音ミクらしさって僕はあんまりない。初音ミクって何だってありっていうか。
For Ito, Miku has the potential to change the way we think about music.
そういう新しいテクノロジーによって新しい音楽のあり方っていうものを模索していきたいと思っていました。
And for her fans, it goes even further.
初音ミクって魂がないので、だからみんな魂を作り上げるために存在している。
Now, there are a lot of fitness gadgets out there. In my quest to get fit, I tested 17 of them over the last few months. At least one personal trainer I know was a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, I've been watching these new technologies come to the market for almost as long as I've been a personal trainer. They're just tricks and tropes. They're not much different than the Bowflex machines or, to be honest, the original Jane Fonda workout video.
But some of these gadgets that are just coming to the market do so much more than what they used to do, just tracking your activities. Out of all of them, this chest strap was my favorite. It comes with a robot coach that points to the future, one where you might not need a human trainer at all. And it works like this. You wear the chest strap so that it can read your heart rate, and that connects to Move's free app that talks to you.
Welcome to Move Heart Rate Hit Outdoor Running. Let's get moving and warm up in Zone 2.
Move's computerized coach tells you what to do at that exact moment, whether you're running outside or you're doing body weight exercises indoors.
Swing your arms faster to get your legs moving quicker. Let's crush this round.
And by reading your heart rate, she knows exactly how hard you're working. She keeps you honest.
Way to go, you are in the target zone. Keep pushing, you're almost at the end of the round. Don't give up.
I've been running for 7 years now, and my biggest problem is that I never push myself hard enough. I end up going on the same slow, comfortable 30-minute jog, but the Move HR Burn blasted me out of that rut. By the end of these half-hour exercises, I was drenched in sweat in a way that I never am when I work out alone. Training with a real person is great, whether that's your group instructor or your coach or your personal trainer, but humans, they're expensive. For the rest of us, this $60 gadget is all you need.
what does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning. He used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped in the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness. Don't you think?
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks.
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
Expose everything you won't admit. And action. This entire video is based on a true story. When I do like motivational speeches or even tell myself like, love yourself and you should love yourself.
This is Lily Singh,
But to fans all over the world, she's the YouTube star Superwoman.
What if everyone is a girl, Superwoman? I know we can change the world for the better, one positive day at a time.
My parents now know what I do. They didn't know what I did for a long time in the beginning of my career. I was just making videos in my room. They had no idea.
Mom, Dad, have you seen my keys? I can't find them anywhere. Because you're always on phone.
Until someone called them, like a family member from another part of Canada, was like, Canada, is your daughter making videos? And the mom was like, I don't know, Lily, are you making videos?
Just making videos grew into an entire career. Today, Lily's YouTube channel has some 12 million subscribers, over 2 billion views, and guest stars like Michelle Obama, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Seth Rogen.
I think a lot of young girls are raised to believe that you're going to go to school and then graduate and then get married and then get a job and then have kids.
And Lily was on that path, all the way through a psychology degree at York University in Toronto. But when she started thinking about a career,
I started to immensely panic and think something was wrong with me because I tried to figure out my life and it wasn't working in that straight line.
It was 2010, and YouTube was only 5 years old.
I thought nothing of YouTube. I was probably the last person in my circle of friends to discover YouTube. And I remember when I did, I thought, this is so strange. There's people making videos in their rooms, and other people are watching them.
So she figured, why not give it a shot?
I one day posted a video because I was sad, and I wanted to be creative and happy.
She didn't know how to edit video or write scripts, so she winged it.
It was so bad and so cringe. And my expectation was literally nothing. I was like, I'm gonna put this video up, a couple of my friends are gonna watch it, probably make fun of me, and that's gonna be the end of this. The second and third video came from, wait, 70 people watched my first one, can I get 80 to watch the next one?
She kept creating, she kept posting, and the viewers kept coming. Lily had found an audience.
A lot of the comments were, oh my God, there's a brown girl on YouTube.
More specifically, Indian. Lily's parents immigrated to Canada from India, and Lily was born and raised in Scarborough, near Toronto.
My home life was awesome. My parents, even though I portrayed them to be quite strict in my videos.
Oi, Lily, where the rest of your skirt, huh? I teach you like this, to walk around like this, showing everything to everyone?
They actually aren't like that at all. They're pretty modern and pretty cool.
Your dress is short. Don't know what for.
And were pretty lenient with me. I mean, I got away with a lot of things. I was a brat. I was a brat.
She had a different idea of what she wanted out of life than other kids. In a grade school graduation slideshow, her classmates said they wanted to be lawyers and doctors.
And then I came up and I was like, rapper.
Making out with your friends, man. But then you say that you hate hoes.
I could just feel my parents being like, why?
Because that's just not something women really did in the Singh family.
I know there was a ton of people that weren't happy about my birth being a female, so I think, and that's some real-ish, but it's a real thing. The best thing I could have done to prove to so many people that didn't want my mom to have a daughter was to become Superwoman.
What if everyone it's a girl, Superwoman?
It was the name of Lily's favorite hip-hop song by Lil Mo featuring Fabulous.
I love the song so much because it was one of the only songs at the time that was an empowering female song, where Lil Mo's going on about, like, I will save guys with my superpowers, and I will save girls with my superpowers, and I am the Superwoman. I thought, this name that I've had for so long that empowered me when I was younger, I'm gonna make this my screen name.
Maybe this should be a new series.
Superwoman didn't just burst onto the scene overnight with a viral video. It was a steady climb fueled by hard work.
The moment that I thought this is going somewhere and this could be a career was the first time I performed internationally. It was in India. And it was the first time where I was truly across the world and people knew my videos.
Singh has transformed herself from a bratty kid to an internet personality to a media mogul. She started a feature film, A Trip to Unicorn Island, in 2016. And her book, How to Be a Boss, hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2017 while she was on a 30-city international tour. Lily started out with the goal of getting millions of subscribers and financial security.
Hurry the hell up!
But after surpassing those goals, success has new meaning.
I've really come to terms with the fact that my definition of success is what's the best legacy I can leave behind. And it's not the number of views, the number of subscribers. It is the number of people that can say, this girl changed my life or changed something in my life positively.
Cooper is that the Constitution also provides for having a vote subsequent to a conviction to prevent a former official who's been tried and convicted for running again. That wouldn't, it defies logic, he says, for that to be there if a trial of a former official wasn't contemplated.
It does seem as if that was written by the people who wrote the Constitution with this in mind. They knew about impeachments and put it in the Constitution. George.
The vote is done. Let's hear Senator Leahy.
There should now be 4 hours of argument by the parties, equally divided, on the question of whether Donald John Trump is subject to the jurisdiction of a court of impeachment for acts committed while President of the United States, notwithstanding the expiration of his term in that office. Mr. Manager Raskin, are you a proponent or opponent of this question?
I'm a proponent.
Thank you. Mr. Castor, are you a proponent or opponent of this question?
We're an opponent.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Manager Raskin, your party may proceed first. You will be able to reserve rebuttal time if you wish. Mr. Raskin, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished members of the Senate. Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Raskin. It's my honor to represent the people of Maryland's 8th Congressional District in the House and also to serve as the lead House manager. And Mr. President, we will indeed reserve time for rebuttal. Thank you. Because I've been a professor of constitutional law for 3 decades, I know there are a lot of people who are dreading endless lectures about the Federalist Papers here. Please breathe easy, okay? I remember well W.H. Auden's line that a professor is someone who speaks while other people are sleeping. You will not be hearing extended lectures from me because our case is based on cold, hard facts. It's all about the facts. President Trump has sent his lawyers here today to try to stop the Senate from hearing the facts of this case. They want to call the trial over before any evidence is even introduced. Their argument is that if you commit an impeachable offense in your last few weeks in office, you do it with constitutional impunity. You get away with it. In other words, conduct that would be a high crime and misdemeanor in your first year as president, and your second year as president, and your third year as president, and for the vast majority of your fourth year as president, you can suddenly do in your last few weeks in office without facing any constitutional accountability at all. This would create a brand new January exception to the Constitution of the United States of America. A January exception. And everyone can see immediately why this is so dangerous. It's an invitation to the president to take his best shot at anything he may want to do on his way out the door, including using violent means to lock that door, to hang on to the Oval Office at all costs, and to block the peaceful transfer of power. In other words, the January exception is an invitation to our founders' worst nightmare. And if we buy this radical argument that President Trump's lawyers advance, we risk allowing January 6th to become our future. And what will that mean for America? Think about it. What will the January exception mean to future generations if you grant it? I'll show you.
We will stop the steal. Today I will lay out just some of the evidence proving that we won this election, and we won it by a landslide. This was not a close election. And after this, We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Let's take the Capitol. Take the Capitol. Let's take the Capitol. We are going to the Capitol, where our problems are. It's that direction.
Tens of thousands of votes. They came in duffel bags. Where the hell did they come from?
Madam Speaker, the Vice President, and the United States Senate.
Off the sidewalk. Stand up more. Stand up more. We outnumber you a million to one out here, dude.
The Constitution says you have to protect our country and you have to protect our Constitution. And you can't vote on fraud. And fraud breaks up everything, doesn't it? When you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. So I hope Mike has the courage to do what he has to do.
Talk about you,
We fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to the Capitol. And we're going to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, because the strong ones don't need any of our help. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country.
Majority Leader. We're debating a step that has never been taken in American history. President Trump claims the election was stolen. The assertions range from specific local allegations to constitutional arguments to sweeping conspiracy theories. But my colleagues, nothing before us proves illegality anywhere near the massive scale that would have tipped the entire election. My challenge today is not about the good people of Arizona.
And it will stand in recess until the call of the chair.
We'll pause.
Protesters are in the building.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, can I have order in the chamber?
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Okay.
There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Senators, the president was impeached by the U.S. House of Representatives on January 13th for doing that. You ask what a high crime and misdemeanor is under our Constitution? That's a high crime and misdemeanor. If that's not an impeachable offense, then there is no such thing. And if the president's arguments for a January exception are upheld, then even if everyone agrees that he's culpable for these events, even if the evidence proves, as we think it definitively does, that the president incited a violent insurrection on the day Congress met to finalize the presidential election, he would have you believe there is absolutely nothing the Senate can do about it. No trial, no facts. He wants you to decide that the Senate is powerless at that point. That can't be right. The transition of power is always the most dangerous moment for democracies. Every historian will tell you that. We just saw it in the most astonishing way. We lived through it. And you know what? The framers of our Constitution knew it. That's why they created a Constitution with an oath written into it that binds the president from his very first day in office until his very last day in office and every day in between. Under that Constitution and under that oath, the President of the United States is forbidden to commit high crimes and misdemeanors against the people at any point that he's in office. Indeed, that's one specific reason the impeachment, conviction, and disqualification powers exist, to protect us against presidents who try to overrun the power of the people in their elections and replace the rule of law with the rule of mobs. These powers must apply even if the president commits his offenses in his final weeks in office. In fact, that's precisely when we need them the most, because that's when elections get attacked. Everything that we know about the language of the Constitution, the framers' original understanding and intent, prior Senate practice, and common sense confirms this rule. Let's start with the text of the Constitution, which in Article 1, Section 2 gives the House the sole power of impeachment when the president commits high crimes and misdemeanors. We exercised that power on January 13th. The president, it is undisputed, committed his offense while he was president. And it is undisputed that we impeached him while he was president. There can be no doubt that this is a valid and legitimate impeachment. And there can be no doubt that the Senate has the power to try this impeachment. We know this because Article 1, Section 3 gives the Senate the sole power to try all impeachments. The Senate has the power, the sole power, to try all impeachments. All means all, and there are no exceptions to the rule. Because the Senate has jurisdiction to try all impeachments, it most certainly has jurisdiction to try this one. It's really that simple. The vast majority of constitutional scholars who studied the question and weighed in on the proposition being advanced by the president, this January exception, heretofore unknown, agree with us. And that includes the nation's most prominent conservative legal scholars, including former 10th Circuit Judge Michael McConnell, the co-founder of the Federalist Society, Stephen Calabrese, Ronald Reagan Solicitor General Charles Freed, luminary Washington lawyer Charles Cooper, among hundreds of other constitutional lawyers and professors. I commend the people I named, their recent writings to you in the newspapers over the last several days. And all of the key precedents, along with detailed explanation of the constitutional history and textual analysis, appear in the trial brief we filed last week and the reply brief that we filed very early this morning. I'll spare you a replay, but I want to highlight a few key points from constitutional history that strike me as compelling in foreclosing President Trump's argument that there's a secret January exception hidden away in the Constitution. The first point comes from English history, which matters because, as Hamilton wrote, England provided the model from which the idea of this institution has been borrowed. And it would have been immediately obvious to anyone familiar with that history that former officials could be held accountable for their abuses while in office. Every single impeachment of a government official that occurred during the framers' lifetime concerned a former official. A former official. Indeed, the most famous of these impeachments occurred while the framers gathered in Philadelphia to write the Constitution. It was the impeachment of Warren Hastings, the former Governor General of the British colony of Bengal, and a corrupt guy. The framers knew all about it, and they strongly supported the impeachment. In fact, the Hastings case was invoked by name at the convention. It was the only specific impeachment case that they discussed at the convention. It played a key role in their adoption of the high crimes and misdemeanors standard. And even though everyone there surely knew that Hastings had left office 2 years before his impeachment trial began, not a single framer, not one, raised a concern when Virginian George Mason held up the Hastings impeachment as a model for us in the writing of our Constitution. The early state constitutions supported the idea too. Every single state constitution in the 1780s either specifically said that former officials could be impeached or were entirely consistent with the idea. In contrast, not a single state constitution prohibited trials of former officials. As a result, there was an overwhelming presumption in favor of allowing legislatures to hold former officials accountable in this way. Any departure from that norm would have been a big deal, and yet there's no sign anywhere that that ever happened. Some states, including Delaware, even confined impeachment only to officials who had already left office. This confirms that removal was never seen as the exclusive purpose of impeachment in America. The goal was always about accountability, protecting society, and deterring official corruption. Delaware matters for another reason. Writing about impeachment in the Federalist Papers, Hamilton explained that the president of America would stand upon no better ground than a governor of New York and upon worse ground than the governors of Maryland and Delaware. He thus emphasized that the president is even more accountable than officials in Delaware, whereas I noted the Constitution clearly allowed impeachment of former officials. And nobody involved in the convention ever said that the framers meant to reject this widely accepted, deeply rooted understanding of the word impeachment when they wrote it into our Constitution. The convention debates instead confirm this interpretation. There, while discussing impeachment, the framers repeatedly returned to the threat of presidential corruption aimed directly at elections, the heart of self-government. Almost perfectly anticipating President Trump, William Davey of North Carolina explained impeachment was for a president who spared, quote, no effort or means whatever to get himself reelected. Hamilton in Federalist 1 said the greatest danger to republics and the liberties of the people comes from political opportunists who begin as demagogues and end as tyrants, and the people who are encouraged to follow them. President Trump may not know a lot about the framers, but they certainly knew a lot about him. Given the framers' intense focus on danger to elections and the peaceful transfer of power, it is inconceivable that they designed impeachment to be a dead letter in the president's final days in office, when opportunities to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power would be most tempting and most dangerous, as we just saw. Thus, as a matter of history and original understanding, there is no merit to President Trump's claim that he can incite an insurrection and then insist weeks later that the Senate lacks the power to even hear evidence at a trial, to even hold a trial. The true rule was stated by former President John Quincy Adams when he categorically declared, I hold myself, so long as I have the breath of life in my body, amenable to impeachment by the House for everything I did during the time I held any public office. When he comes up in a minute, my colleague, Mr. Neguse of Colorado, will further pursue the relevant Senate precedents and explain why this body's practice has been supported by the text of the Constitution. And Mr. Cicilline of Rhode Island will then respond to the fallacies presented by the President's counsel. And after these gentlemen speak, I will return to discuss the importance, the fundamental importance of the Senate rejecting President Trump's argument for the preservation of democratic self-government and the rule of law in the United States of America. I now will turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Neguse of Colorado.
Do I have to recognize him? No. Okay.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, my name is Joe Neguse, and I represent Colorado's 2nd Congressional District in the United States Congress. Like many of you, I'm an attorney. I practiced law before I came to Congress, tried a lot of different cases, some more unique than others. Certainly never a case as important as this one, nor a case with such a heavy and weighty constitutional question for you all to decide. Thankfully, as lead manager Raskin so thoroughly explained, the framers have answered that question for you, for us. And you don't need to be a constitutional scholar to know that the argument President Trump asks you to adopt is not just wrong, it's dangerous. And you don't have to take my word for it. This body, the world's greatest deliberative body, the United States Senate, has reached that same conclusion in one form or another over the past 200 years in multiple occasions that we'll go through. Over 150 constitutional scholars, experts, judges, conservative, liberal, you name it, they overwhelmingly have reached the same conclusion that, of course, you can try, convict, and disqualify a former president. And that makes sense, because the text of the Constitution makes clear there is no January exception to the impeachment power. That presidents can't commit grave offenses in their final days and escape any congressional response. That's not how our Constitution works. Let's start with the precedent, with what has happened in this very chamber. I'd like to focus on just two cases. I'll go through them quickly. One of them is the nation's very first impeachment case, which actually was of a former official. In 1797, about a decade after our country had ratified our Constitution, there was a senator from Tennessee by the name of William Blount, who was caught conspiring with the British to try to sell Florida and Louisiana. Ultimately, President Adams caught him. He turned over the evidence to Congress. 4 days later, the House of Representatives impeached him. A day after that, this body, the United States Senate, expelled him from office. So he was very much a former official. Despite that, the House went forward with its impeachment proceeding in order to disqualify him from ever again holding federal office. And so the Senate proceeded with the trial, with none other than Thomas Jefferson presiding. Now, Blount argued that the Senate couldn't proceed because he had already been expelled. But here's the interesting thing. He expressly disavowed any claim that former officials can't ever be impeached. I mean, unlike President Trump, he was very clear that he respected and understood that he could not even try to argue that ridiculous position. Even impeached Senator Blount recognized the inherent absurdity of that view. Here's what he said. I certainly never shall contend that an officer may first commit an offense and afterwards avoid by resigning his office. That's the point. And there was no doubt, because the founders were around to confirm that that was their intent and the obvious meaning of what is in the Constitution. Fast forward 80 years later, arguably the most important precedent that this body has to consider: the trial of former Secretary of War William Belknap. I'm not going to go into all the details, but just in short, in 1876, the House discovered that he was involved in a massive kickback scheme. Hours before the House committee that discovered this conduct released its report documenting the scheme, Belknap literally rushed to the White House to resign, tender his resignation to President Ulysses Grant, to avoid any further inquiry into his misconduct, and of course, to avoid being disqualified from holding federal office in the future. Well, later that day, aware of the resignation, what did the House do? The House moved forward and unanimously impeached him, making clear its power to impeach a former official. And when his case reached the Senate, this body, Belknap made the exact same argument that President Trump is making today, that you all lack jurisdiction, any power to try him because he's a former official. Now, many senators at that time, when they heard that argument, literally they were sitting in the same chairs you all are sitting in today. They were outraged by that argument. Outraged. You can read their comments in the record. They knew it was a dangerous argument with dangerous implications. It would literally mean that a president could betray their country, leave office, and avoid impeachment and disqualification entirely. And that's why, in the end, the United States Senate decisively voted that the Constitution required them to proceed with the trial. The Belknap case is clear precedent that the Senate must proceed with this trial, since it rejected pretrial dismissal, affirmed its jurisdiction, and moved to a full consideration of the merits. Now, Belknap ultimately was not convicted, but only after a thorough public inquiry into his misconduct, which created a record of his wrongdoing. It ensured his accountability and deterred anyone else from considering such corruption by making clear that it was intolerable. The trial served important constitutional purposes. Now, given that precedent that I've described to you, given all that precedent imparts, you could imagine my surprise, Lead Manager Raskin's surprise, when we were reviewing a trial brief filed by the president, in which his counsel insists that the Senate actually didn't decide anything in the Belknap case. They say, these are not my words, I'll quote from their trial brief, "It cannot be read as foreclosing an argument that they never dealt with." Never dealt with? The Senate didn't debate this question for 2 hours. The Senate debated this very question for 2 weeks. The Senate spent an additional 2 weeks deliberating on the jurisdictional question. And at the end of those deliberations, they decided decisively that the Senate has jurisdiction and that it could proceed, that it must proceed to a full trial. And by the way, unlike Belknap, as we know, President Trump was not impeached for run-of-the-mill corruption, misconduct. He was impeached for inciting a violent insurrection. An insurrection where people died in this building. An insurrection that desecrated our seat of government. And if Congress were just to stand completely aside in the face of such an extraordinary crime against the republic, it would invite future presidents to use their power without any fear of accountability. And none of us, I know this, none of this, no matter our party or our politics, wants that. Now, we've gone through the highlights of the precedent, and I think it's important that you know, as Lead Manager Raskin mentioned, that scholars overwhelmingly who have reviewed this same precedent have all come to the same conclusion, that the Senate must hear this case. Let's go through just a few short examples. To start, all of us, I know, are familiar with the Federalist Society. Some of you may know Stephen Calabrese personally. He's the co-founder of the Federalist Society. He actually was the chairman of the board in 2019. He was the first president of the Yale Federalist Society chapter board, a position that I understand Senator Hawley later held. Here is what Mr. Calabrese has to say. On January 21st, he issued a public letter, stating, "Our carefully considered views of the law lead all of us to agree that the Constitution permits the impeachment, conviction, and disqualification of former officers, including presidents." And by the way, he's not the only one. As Lead Manager Raskin said, President Reagan's former Solicitor General, among many others. Another prominent conservative scholar, known to many of you, again personally, is former 10th Circuit Court of Appeals judge, my circuit, Judge Michael McConnell. He was nominated by President George W. Bush. He was confirmed by this body unanimously. Senator Hatch, many of you served with, he had this to say about Judge McConnell, that he's an honest man. He calls it as he sees it, and he's beholden to no one and no group. Well, what does Judge McConnell have to say about the question that you're debating this afternoon? He said the following: "Given the impeachment of Mr. Trump was legitimate, the text makes clear that the Senate has power to try that impeachment." You heard Lead Manager Raskin mention another lawyer, Chuck Cooper. He's a prominent conservative lawyer here in Washington, has represented former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. He issued an editorial just 2 days ago, very powerful, observing that scholarship in this question has matured substantially, and that ultimately the arguments that President Trump is championing are beset by serious weaknesses. Finally, we've gone through a lot of scholars. I'll finish on this one. There's another scholar that I know some of you know, and some of you have actually spoken with recently. Up until just a few weeks ago, he was a recognized champion of the view that the Constitution authorizes the impeachment of former officials, and that is Professor Jonathan Turley. Let me show you what I mean. These are his words. First, in a very detailed study, thorough study, he explained that, quote, "The resignation from office does not prevent trial on articles of impeachment." That's Professor Turley's words. Same piece. He celebrated the Belknap trial. He described it as a corrective measure that helped the system regain legitimacy. He wrote another article. He's written several on this topic. This one was actually, it's a 146-page study, very detailed. And in that study, he said, quote, that the decision in Belknap was correct in its view that impeachment historically had extended to former officials, such as Warren Hastings, who you heard Lead Manager Raskin describe. In fact, as you can see, Professor Turley argued that the House could have impeached and the Senate could have tried Richard Nixon after he resigned. His quote on this, very telling, quote, "Future presidents could not assume that mere resignation would avoid a trial of their conduct in the United States Senate." Finally, last quote from Professor Turley, that no man in no circumstance can escape the account which he owes to the laws of his country. Not my words, not Lead Manager Raskin's words, Professor Jonathan Turley's words. I agree with him because he's exactly right. Now, a question one might reasonably ask after going through all those quotes from such noted jurists and scholars is, why is there such agreement on this topic? Well, the reason's pretty simple. Because it's what the Constitution says. I want to walk you through 3 provisions of the Constitution that make clear that the Senate must try this case. First, let's start with what the Constitution says about Congress's power in Article 1. You heard Lead Manager Raskin make this point, but it's worth underscoring. Article 1, Section 2 gives the House the sole power of impeachment. Article 1, Section 3 gives the Senate the sole power to try all impeachments. Now, based on President Trump's argument, one would think that language includes caveats, exceptions, but it doesn't. It doesn't say impeachment of current civil officers. It doesn't say impeachment of those still in office. The framers didn't mince words. They provided express, absolute, unqualified grants of jurisdictional power to the House to impeach and to the Senate to try all impeachments. Not some, all. Former Judge McConnell, judge that we talked about earlier, he provides a very effective textual analysis of this provision. You can see it up here on the slide. I'll just give you the highlight. He says, and I'll quote, this is Judge McConnell, "Given that the impeachment of Mr. Trump was legitimate, the text makes clear that the Senate has power to try that impeachment." Now, again, here is what is pretty interesting, me at least. When we presented this argument in our trial brief, which we filed over a week ago, well, we laid it out, again, step by step, so that you could consider it, and so that opposing counsel could consider it as well. We received President Trump's response yesterday, and the trial brief offers no rebuttal to this point. None. And in fairness, I can't think of any convincing response. I mean, the Constitution is just exceptionally clear on this point. Now, perhaps they will have something to say today about it, but they did not yesterday. There's another provision worth mentioning here because there's been a lot of confusion about it, and I'm going to try to clear this up. It's the provision on removal and disqualification. Now, we all know the Senate imposes a judgment only when it convicts. Up on the screen, you'll see Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7. So with that in mind, the language says that the Senate convicts, the judgment shall not extend further than removal and disqualification. That's it. The meaning is clear. The Senate has the power to impose removal which only applies to current officials, and separately, it has the power to impose disqualification, which obviously applies to both current and former officers, but it doesn't have the power to go any further than that. Now, as I understand President Trump's argument, they believe that this language somehow says that disqualification can only follow removal of a current officer. But it doesn't. That interpretation essentially rewrites the Constitution. It adds words that aren't there. I mean, after all, the Constitution does not say removal from office and then disqualification. It doesn't say removal from office followed by disqualification. It simply says the Senate can't do more than two possible sentences: removal and disqualification. And this, by the way, is not the first time that this direct question has been debated in this chamber. 146 years ago, during the Belknap trial, Senator George Edmunds of Vermont, he's one of the most prestigious Republican senators of his time. He sat right where Senator Grassley sits today. He zeroed in on this exact point during the Belknap trial. This is his quote: "A prohibition against doing more than two things cannot be turned into a command to do both or neither." And just imagine the consequences of such an absurd interpretation of the Constitution. I mean, if President Trump were right about that language, then officials could commit the most extraordinary, destructive offenses against the American people, high crimes and misdemeanors. They'd have total control over whether they can ever be impeached, and if they are, whether the Senate can try the case. If they want to escape any public inquiry into their misconduct or the risk of disqualification from future office, then it's pretty simple. They could just resign 1 minute before the House impeaches, or even 1 minute before the Senate trial, or they could resign during the Senate trial if it's not looking so well. That would effectively erase disqualification from the Constitution. It would put wrongdoers in charge of whether the Senate can try them. Third and final reason why President Trump must stand trial: provision of Article 1 of the Constitution. You'll see here on the screen that the Constitution twice describes the accused in an impeachment trial. Here's what I want you to focus on. The interesting thing is, notice the words. It refers to a person and a party being impeached. Now, again, we know that the framers gave a lot of thought to the words that they chose. They even had a style committee during the Constitutional Convention. They could have written civil officers here. I mean, they did that elsewhere in the Constitution. That would have ultimately limited impeachment trials to current officials. But instead, they used broader language to describe who could be tried by the United States Senate. So who could be put on trial for impeachment other than civil officers? Who else could a person or a party be? Well, really, there's only one possible answer: former officers. And again, that actually might explain why, during the Belknap trial, Senator Thomas Bayard of Delaware, he later became the Secretary of State of the United States. He sat right where Senator Carper is sitting now. He found this point so compelling that he felt compelled to speak out on it. And during the trial, he concluded that the Constitution must allow the impeachment and trial of people and parties who are not civil officers. And the only group that could possibly encompass was former officials like Belknap, and of course, here, like President Trump. And just so we're clear, in full disclosure, this is another argument that was not addressed by President Trump in his rebuttal. And we know why they didn't. Because their argument doesn't square with the plain text of the Constitution. There is one provision that President Trump relies on almost exclusively. Article 2, Section 4. I'm sure you'll see it when they present their arguments. Their argument is that the language you'll see on the screen somehow prevents you from holding this trial by making removal from office an absolute requirement. But again, where does the language say that? Where does it say anything in that provision about your jurisdiction? In fact, this provision isn't even in the part of the Constitution that addresses your authority. It's in Article 2, not Article 1. And it certainly says nothing about former officials. President Trump's interpretation doesn't square with history, originalism, textualism. In fact, even Chuck Cooper, the famous conservative lawyer I mentioned earlier, with clients like the House Minority Leader, he has concluded that this provision of the Constitution that President Trump relies on cuts against his position, his words. And that's because, as Cooper says, Article 2, Section 4 means just what it says. I mean, the first half describes what an official must do to be impeached, namely commit high crimes and misdemeanors, and the second half describes what happens when civil officers of the United States, including the sitting president, are convicted, removal from office. That's it. In Cooper's words, it simply establishes what is known in criminal law as a mandatory minimum punishment. It says nothing about former officials, nothing at all. Given all of that, it is not surprising that in President Trump's legal trial brief, 75-page brief, they struggled to find any professors to support their position. They did cite one professor, though, Professor Kalt. He's an expert in this field, who they claimed agreed with them that the only purpose of impeachment is removal. Professor Kalt's position, which they had to have known because it's in the article that they cite in the brief, is that removal is, quote, not the sole end of impeachment. Actually, in that same article, he describes the view advocated by President Trump's lawyers as having deep flaws. And again, you do not have to take my word for it. You can take Professor Kalt's word for it, the professor they cited in their brief filed yesterday, because he tweeted about it. And on the screen here, this is what he had to say. I'm not going to read through it in great detail. I'll just simply give you the highlights. President Trump's brief cites my 2001 article on late impeachment a lot, but in several places, they misrepresent what I wrote quite badly. There are multiple examples of such flat-out misrepresentations. They didn't have to be disingenuous and misleading like this. This key constitutional scholar, relied on by President Trump, said it just right. I have explained in great detail the many reasons why the argument that President Trump advocates for here today is wrong. I just want to close with a note about why it's dangerous. Lead Manager Raskin explained that impeachment exists to protect the American people from officials who abuse their power, who betray them. It exists for a case just like this one. Honestly, it is hard to imagine a clearer example of how a president could abuse his office, inciting violence against a co-equal branch of government while seeking to remain in power after losing an election, sitting back and watching it unfold. We all know the consequences. Like every one of you, I was in the Capitol on January 6th. I was on the floor with Lead Manager Raskin. Like every one of you, I was evacuated as this violent mob stormed the Capitol's gates. What you experienced that day, what we experienced that day, what our country experienced that day is the framers' worst nightmare come to life. Presidents can't inflame insurrection in their final weeks and then walk away like nothing happened. And yet that is the rule that President Trump asks you to adopt. I urge you, we urge you, to decline his request, to vindicate the Constitution, to let us try this case.
Congressman Joe Neguse, 36 years old, representative from Colorado.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, my name is David Cicilline. I have the honor of representing the 1st Congressional District of Rhode Island. As I hope is now clear from the arguments of Mr. Raskin and Mr. Neguse, impeachment is not merely about removing someone from office. Fundamentally, impeachment exists to protect our constitutional system, to keep each of us safe, to uphold our freedom, to safeguard our democracy. It achieves that by deterring abuse of the extraordinary power that we entrust to our presidents, from the very first day in office to the very last day. It also ensures accountability for presidents who harm us or our government. In the aftermath of a tragedy, it allows us an opportunity to come together and to heal by working through what happened and reaffirming our constitutional principles. And it authorizes this body, and this body alone, to disqualify from our political system anybody whose conduct in office proves that they present a danger to the republic. But impeachment would fail to achieve these purposes if you created, for the first time ever, despite the words of the framers and the Constitution, a January exception, as Mr. Raskin explained. Now, I was a former defense lawyer for many years, and I can understand why President Trump and his lawyers don't want you to hear this case, why they don't want you to see the evidence. But the argument that you lack jurisdiction rests on a purely fictional loophole. Purely fictional. Designed to allow the former president to escape all accountability for conduct that is truly indefensible under our Constitution. You saw the consequences of his actions on the video that we played earlier. I'd like to emphasize in still greater detail the extraordinary constitutional offense that the former president thinks you have no power whatsoever to adjudicate. While spreading lies about the election outcome in a brazen attempt to retain power against the will of the American people, he incited an armed, angry mob to riot. And not just anywhere, but here, in the seat of our government, in the Capitol, during a joint session of Congress, when the vice president presided while we carried out the peaceful transfer of power, which was interrupted for the first time in our history. This was a disaster of historic proportion. It was also an unforgivable betrayal of the oath of office of President Trump, the oath he swore, an oath that he sullied and dishonored to advance his own personal interests. And make no mistake about it, as you think about that day, things could have been much worse. As one senator said, they could have killed all of us. It was only the bravery and sacrifice of the police who suffered deaths and injuries as a result of President Trump's actions that prevented greater tragedy. At trial, we will prove with overwhelming evidence that President Trump is singularly and directly responsible for inciting the assault on the Capitol. We will also prove that his dereliction of duty, his desire to seek personal advantage from the mayhem, and his decision to issue tweets further inciting the mob, attacking the vice president, all compounded the already enormous damage. Now, virtually every American who saw those events unfold on television was absolutely horrified by the events of January 6th. But we also know how President Trump himself felt about the attack. He told us. Here's what he tweeted at 6:01 as the Capitol was in shambles and as dozens of police officers and other law enforcement officers lay battered and bruised and bloodied. Here's what he said: "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever." Every time I read that tweet, it chills me to the core. The President of the United States sided with the insurrectionists. He celebrated their cause. He validated their attack. He told them, "Remember this day forever." Hours after they marched through these halls looking to assassinate Vice President Pence, the Speaker of the House, and any of us they could find. Given all that, it's no wonder that President Trump would rather talk about jurisdiction and a supposed January exception, rather than talk about what happened on January 6th. Make no mistake, his arguments are dead wrong. They're distractions from what really matters. The Senate can and should require President Trump to stand trial. My colleagues have already addressed many of President Trump's efforts to escape trial. I'd like to cover the remainder and then address the broader issues at stake in this trial. For starters, in an extension of his mistaken reading of the Constitution, President Trump insists that he cannot face trial in the Senate because he's merely a private citizen. He references here the Bill of Attainder clause. But as Mr. Neguse just explained, the Constitution refers to the defendant in an impeachment trial as a person and a party, and certainly he counts as one of those. Let's also apply some common sense. There's a reason that he now insists on being called the 45th President of the United States rather than Citizen Trump. He isn't a randomly selected private citizen. He's a former officer of the United States government. He's a former President of the United States of America. He's treated differently under a law called the Former Presidents Act. For 4 years, we trusted him with more power than anyone else on earth. As a former president who promised on a Bible to use his power faithfully, he can and should answer for whether he kept that promise while bound by it in office. His insistence